Shawn Achor, author of The Happiness Advantage, was called into the global tax accounting company KPMG, and they wanted him to help their tax auditors and managers become happier people. How had this bunch of successful, highly paid accountants become so miserable? Shawn saw the problem clearly. They spent their entire working day looking for errors and mistakes, and that talent spilled over into every aspect of their life, making them miserable. This focus on the negative, this talent for spotting the problem, focusing on the negative, it affects us all. We scan an otherwise perfect garden for weeds. We admire the politician who pokes holes in the other guy's arguments. We ask our children, what's wrong with this picture? The teacher puts 2 small little red crosses next to 2 sentences in a 3,000-word essay, and that's all we see. The problem, the mistake. We read blogs devoted to spotting error in the most venerated preachers and theologians. Such negativity can cause us problems. It can leave us feeling miserable. Why is everything so terrible? It can make us feel self-righteous. We're better than them. Look what they do. It can make us feel anxious. Crime's out of control. I could be shot any second. I better stay indoors. Focusing on the negative can cause real problems. To have peace, says Paul in his letter to the Philippians, we need to reprogram our minds to focus on whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is praiseworthy. Think about such things. And such thinking comes with a promise. Put this way of thinking into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. The opposite is true as well. If you focus on what is false, what is offensive, what is dishonest, what is filthy, what is ugly, what is loathsome, don't be surprised if you're hyper-anxious, depressed, and you feel the God of peace is far, far away. Today I want to help us all to see if we can shift our focus just slightly. Move our eyes from the gutter to the stars. Let's see, shall we? I wonder, where do you turn to for news? Which news source do you normally go to? Do you always go first to the media source whose outlook you agree with? Are you a Guardian reader? Or are you a Torygraph? Or a Daily Mail reader? Do you ever read the opposition's view? Why not? It seems to me the more we focus on our home team, their facts, their figures, their focus on the lies of the other team, we soon become cynical and sceptical, and we start to mistrust all politicians. Paul wrote, whatever is true, think on these things. Maybe we need to be a bit more analytical in the way we read the news. Does everyone believe this? Well, why don't they? And what about opinion pieces which are designed to shape public opinion? Do you like to read opinion pieces in newspapers or whatever paper you read online? I know I do. I personally love a strongly opinionated article as much as the next guy. I love a strongly opinionated article bashing what I think needs bashing. I want to say, yeah, do right. Give it to them. But as I reflect, I find all that's happened is I've wound myself up. Has my anger, annoyance, irritation, has it solved anything? Not at all. Does Boris know I'm angry? Does Sir Keira know I'm irritated? Are these opinion pieces helping me understand the world? Or are they just feeding my prejudices and making me feel justified in my views? Whatever is true, think about such things. If you think this sort of stuff is not helping you in your walk with Jesus, cut it out. You know, I sometimes like to play a little game before I read those opinion pieces. Basically, I read the headline of the opinion piece and I try and guess what the commentator will say. I have to say, knowing whether it's a Polly Toynbee or Richard Littlejohn writing the article, it's pretty straightforward. You can pretty much know exactly what they're going to say before they write it. However, there are a few commentators who have genuinely original opinions, and you can't always second guess what they're going to write. They don't write alongside party political lines. They'll fly a different opinion. I like those commentators. I also like those commentators who, while they may have a strong opinion one way or the other, they can at least appreciate where the other side is coming from. There's a generosity of spirit in their argument. Those guys are rare, but they exist. Paul says, whatever is noble, think on these things. I said in my last talk how the media recognise that the bad news sells better than good news. And that's why the media love to spin stories. They love to turn any story into bad news. Or if it's a bad news story already, they're going to turn it into the worst story ever. So, for example, if the Office of National Statistics says the birth rate has increased, the news says it was announced today the birth rate has increased, leading to increased fears of overcrowding and pressures on local councils to provide public services. But if the birth rate decreases, then they say, today there's fears many schools will have to close and public services will be squeezed due to lower tax revenues. If the average life expectancy increases, then the media say, bad news! Fears today as pensions will be squeezed due to the increased life expectancy of today's young people. If the life expectancy decreases, bad news! People are dying earlier. What is the government doing, killing people? I'm sure you've seen many examples of this in the way the media reports sort of anything about the COVID situation. For the media, it's fair to say every silver lining has a cloud. And this is bad news for us. If we focus too much on the news, we can end up being anxious because we forget God is in control. There's another aspect, another characteristic of our media we need to watch out for. I believe our media is as negative as the rest of the world's media, but it's got one additional feature. Our media hates Britain. Have you noticed how pretty much every news story is always shaped to say, Britain, it's the worst in the world when it comes to whatever. You'd think we were the murder capital of the world, the way some media outlets report crime. Does it matter? Well, I think it does. If people go around saying, I'm ashamed to be British, what a terrible country I live in, we're the world's worst, we're worse than North Korea. Do you think we're going to be happy, joyful people? Or depressed and miserable? How much money are we going to have to spend on mental health resources to cope with it? Whether you're a patriot or not, it's not healthy to assume Britain is always the world's worst at whatever. Whenever it's true, think about such things. Our media tends to publicise the vile and sordid side of life. Every time I turn on iPlayer, I'm confronted with large adverts to watch, harlots, a period drama, all about prostitutes. The month before it was all about drag queens. The media love to focus on the sordid, the vile, the cesspools of life. Channel 4 will ask me, have I got a story of being addicted to crack or sold as a slave, or have I fallen in love with a horse, or have I taken part in an orgy last week? Get in touch. They want the debased side of life. You won't see a programme following a nice, normal family. The media is only interested in the dysfunctional. They don't want stories of success. They don't want to publicise stories of good schools performing well. You're not going to see a TV documentary on the best schools in Britain unless it's an expose on how corrupt or evil they really are. You will see a documentary on a failing school, though. Paul said, whatever is pure. Think about such things. Maybe we need to retrain ourselves to tell the stories that the media won't. Share good news stories of people we're impressed by. How about trying to share one good news story a day with someone. Be that encouraging person. Why not read a Christian newspaper like Evangelicals Now or Christianity Today? They'll share some positive news stories of what God's doing in our world. They may even give a different slant to the mainstream news. Paul says, whatever is lovely, think on these things. Every day on my computer, I get a beautiful screensaver, a picture from somewhere in the world as my screensaver. And the first thing I do is I gaze on it, I savour the sight. There's a lot of ugliness in this world, and especially on the internet. But here, on my screen, is something beautiful. So I take a moment and I praise God as I gaze at the beautiful scene or see an incredible sight somewhere in the world that I'm never going to get to. Wherever I find beautiful pictures of God's creation, I use it as a stop point, a time to reflect on God's goodness and beauty. I find the National Geographic magazine always has some beautiful pictures of our world. That's no accident. One of their photographers, Duet Jones, says his photos are continually trying to answer the question, what is right here? What can I celebrate? A lady I know in Rushton, she takes quirky, beautiful photos of stuff that she sees around Rushton in her garden or in Hall Park. Have a look at these on your screen now. She sees the quirky in nature. As I walk around town, I try and notice God's creation. Could be a robin, could be the way, I don't know, shadows on the tree look like a Monet painting. And I try and stop and I take a moment to praise my Creator. If you like animal documentaries, that's also a chance to stop and praise God and fill your mind with what is lovely. Personally, I quite like Spy in the Wild, where they make a robot animal to spy on the animals up close. Whatever is lovely, think on these things. Paul says, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think on these things. Let me share one of my pet hates, phone-in shows, particularly the Jeremy Vine show on Radio 2. Now, the normal format is Jeremy asks some small-minded question. I don't know, do buses drive too fast nowadays? Are Mars bars getting smaller? You know, the really big issues that keep us all awake at night. Now, I'm so old, I remember when Jeremy Vine actually used to be a journalist and he actually dealt with real issues. But anyway, after asking the big questions, members of the great British public phone up and they come on to have a whinge. And as soon as they do, I always reach for the off button. And I do the same with any answers on Radio 4 when members of the great British public come on to whinge along party lines. Awful. But these programmes are popular because we love to whinge. We love to be critical. Whinging is practically a national pastime. The Aussies say, how do you know a British Airways jet has landed? Answer, when the jet engines are turned off, the whining still continues. We Brits, we can complain all day long how awful pretty much anything is. It's so easy. But do you really feel better after setting the world so right? I don't. I'm usually more angry after venting my spleen. I'm usually more ungrateful after my whinge. My whinging doesn't change the world. Paul says, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think on these things. How can you do this? How about when the whinging starts, don't join in. Second, when you find an article with wise insights and helpful advice, celebrate it. Post it to others. When you find a good service, a good product, tell others about it. I know a lady who gives up something each year for Lent, and she's done it all. I asked her what was the hardest thing she ever gave up. I expected her to say chocolate, because she's a chocoholic. And she said, giving up chocolate. Yeah, it was hard, but the hardest thing to give up was whinging. Why don't you try it? Go 24 hours without moaning. Go 24 hours without saying something negative about the government, other people, some product. Instead, try and fill those hours with hopeful, optimistic, constructive, uplifting words. It's an interesting experiment. You soon see how much negativity you allow yourself to wallow in. Friends, it may be human nature to dwell on the dark side of life, to think about the worst, most awful, terriblest things which have happened and which happen. But it's not spirit-filled nature. Yes, we are to be aware of all that dark stuff, but we are not to let our minds dwell on it. When we let our minds dwell on that stuff, we become anxious and depressed, and we lose our hope. Instead, we must train ourselves to focus on whatever is true, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is noble, whatever is just, whatever is praiseworthy. Think on these things, says Paul, and the peace of God will be with you. May God's peace be with you this week. Amen.